What if I told you that your weight loss journey could be more about mindset and environment than dieting? In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Yasmeen Elamir, triple board certified endocrinologist, to uncover weight loss secrets and bust myths you might be relying on. Listen in as we demystify the most common dieting trends and provide practical advice that can fit into your busy life. Don't miss this game-changing conversation on the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. Hi friends, it's Natalie here. I'm really excited for you to catch this episode. We're diving into one of your most requested topics, weight loss and how to really make it stick. Joining me today is Dr. Yasmeen Elamir, a triple board certified endocrinologist and obesity specialist who shares her personal journey and expert insights into handling weight with care and without stigma. Dr. Yaz dishes out some fantastic advice, breaking down the different struggles people face when it comes to weight and health. Whether it's the mindset, genetics, or lifestyle choices, she has some actionable tips that you can start using today. We're going to touch on everything from keto diets to the impact of screen time on your weight, and it might not be what you expect. Remember, you can subscribe to the podcast to never miss an episode. Also, check out the show notes today as I have some free resources, including a list of mood-boosting foods, a hunger fullness scale chart, and a grocery list for one of the most popular and sustainable diets for health, the Mediterranean diet. I really enjoyed this conversation with Dr. Yaz, and she gave me some really good tips that I know you are going to love as well. So let's get started. Dr. Yaz, thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, your expertise is probably the most requested topic that I get for the podcast because it's something that most of us struggle with, especially women in their 40s, 50s, really at any age, but losing weight, keeping it off, and not thinking about it all the time.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's definitely the biggest struggle I see my patients struggle with for sure.
So tell us about your expertise and how you approach the topic with your patients.
Yeah, so I'm a triple board certified endocrinologist and obesity specialist. And, honestly, I struggled with my weight my whole life. So it's definitely been something that I saw my mom struggle with, especially when she was in her 40s and 50s, and then I've struggled with. And so when I approach my patients about this, I really look at them and say, how did I feel in this seat? How was I dealing with this? So basically delicately. So I approach it in a very delicate way, really trying to dig and see what their goals are, what's bothering them, without weight stigma, because that's very important. And I think it's something we suffer with a lot in the doctor's office when we want to lose weight.
So I want to get a little deeper into where we are, especially in America. Like, are we really different? And I have listeners from all over the world, but is it true that we are different from other places because of the types of foods we consume or maybe the mindset that we have?
We are, and we're not at the same time. So I think the whole world is obsessed with food. So example, in my office, I'm half Egyptian. So I have a lot of Middle Eastern patients who are not from America. And I will say they are just as obsessed with food as we are. So that mindset is the same, but our food itself is completely different. So in certain ways, the food industry is just completely overtaken by only a certain amount of companies, right? There's I think it's something unheard of, 80% of all the food industries is taken up by 8 companies that really manage it. So the foods are heavily processed. There's a lot of chemicals. And I'm not saying other countries don't have those, or maybe they have other chemicals we don't, but it is very much out of our control to a degree. So without a lot of work, it's very hard to avoid this when it comes to processed foods. So in America, our food is a little bit different. The other thing is in America, because everything's by state, right? For the most part, our water sources are different state to state. The problems I see in my clients online, I deal with out of my state of New Jersey. I treat patients all over the country. And so those patients I treat, I notice they have completely different environmental factors affecting their food and water supply. And so it is very much different in our country, but at the same time, a lot of the same. And each state is suffering from different things that are in our environment and especially in our food.
Sometimes I think because I've struggled too, we go up and down, I blame it on the processed foods, I blame it on, like you said, the water, but how much of it is the problems that we have? How much of that is what we're eating versus our mindset and our discipline?
Honestly, I would say maybe a third of it could be, genetics definitely play a role, maybe about a third, to a degree. And then I would say about one third is definitely the mindset, that belief system, how you deal with stress, how that affects your hormones, all of those things. And then I would say a third of it maybe is the lifestyle, in my opinion, in the sense of diet and exercise. And so the reality is that they're predicting that nearly 50% of people will be obese by 2030 in our country. So regardless of whether, it's different lawmakers' faults or this or that, it's just our reality. We're in an obesogenic and toxigenic environment. And so our diet and our exercise and our mindset are the biggest thing in our control. The other things we can absolutely rally for, and push for. But the reality is that in this moment, those are the things in our control, and that's what we need to focus on.
So talk about your practice and your patients. Who are the people that come to you and what are their biggest struggles?
So the people who come to me are from all walks of life, but the biggest things they struggle with are controlling their blood sugar and their weight. And so a lot of them struggle maybe overthinking, like, how can I fix this? What's the best diet, the best quick fix? And that's one subset of patients. And then I have another subset who are like, I don't have time for this. I want medications. What's the fastest way for me to lose weight and fix my sugar? And then I have another third of patients who really honestly want to be educated. They want to learn and they're willing to keep an open mind, to everything, including, a natural way that maybe isn't as fast as a way with maybe medications, but can get them there. And so definitely every walks of life, both sexes, all age groups. And that's the biggest struggle, is them knowing what they want and then me being able to give them something that fits their values.
So you, I imagine, have to listen and categorize them in one of those places and then decide, here's how I, as a doctor, can best help them.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Where do you start?
Yeah. So the first question, I ask them is, when it comes to, their weight and things like this, is that, what brings you in today? And usually that is enough of a question to just get it rolling in, right? If someone's there for that, they usually come right out with it. But then sometimes I'll ask them that and they don't say much. And when they don't say much, it also means it's likely what they're coming in with because they're afraid to say something. And so, that's when we may bring up other stuff. Was there anything else, that was bothering you or troubling you or something you've been struggling with? And once I kind of use that, because I don't like to say your weight or your this, because that's really not the way to speak to people, when it comes to managing weight. You want to say, what are you struggling with? Because people who do suffer from obesity are suffering from obesity. They're not obese. That's not part of their identity. And so when we speak to them in a way that deals with the struggle or the pain or something they're going through, then all the right answers come out and they really tell me where they're at and where they want to be and the things they know could help, and ask me for what else is there.
So can we get to some tangible things people can do? So you have a patient that comes in and says, I need to lose 20, 30 pounds. Help me. What do you do? What kinds of things can we, listening today, start doing to modify our lifestyle or whatever those things are?
The first thing I always have people do is take an inventory. So I'll ask them, what did you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner yesterday? And what movement did you do? And they'll tell me, so usually I do X. And then I say, no. What did you do yesterday? I don't care what day yesterday was. That tells me a few things. It tells me, are they paying attention to what they're eating? A lot of us, we just need awareness, just a mindset of understanding what we're doing. And then that question, they'll start laughing. And then they realize, okay, maybe depending on how much research they've done already, they understand they just need to incorporate more vegetables, right? Aiming for more vegetables, aiming for higher protein numbers, more fiber, less processed foods, more cooking at home, right? Some people, they don't have that education yet on understanding what actually would be a healthier diet, right? And so that question really helps me help them by explaining that. So if someone does know the things, we focus more on targeting the types of overeat, whether that's emotional eating, boredom eating, mindless eating, incorporating physical activity, time management even. But other people, it's more, okay, I'll start with something like a plate method where I'll take a simple piece of paper, I'll draw 3 circles and give them kind of a very broad diet that shows maybe this much on the plate protein, especially for, my clients who are in that, 40s to 50s range, that perimenopausal range, menopausal range, really focusing on how much of the plate is protein, fiber, and the things they need to live, a very good life and help their gut microbiome and help that weight come off more naturally and easily. So those are the things I generally do to give them a tangible thing to look for in the beginning.
Is it the same for everyone with the same problems, or is it very individualized?
Oh, it's so individualized. So example, if someone's vegetarian, so I have a lot of, I'm in New Jersey, so we are the ultimate melting pot. So I will have someone who's, say, Indian, and they are vegetarian. And so maybe the processed foods they're dealing with that are a problem are maybe more, those alternatives, the alternatives to meat and stuff. So then we really have to kind of focus on getting more whole foods that are protein-based for them that won't, spike their sugar, mess up their energy, and help them lose weight. And on the other hand, right, if someone is in that perimenopausal, stage in life, I'm focusing on high fiber, high protein, and building muscle because their estrogen is going down and they're losing muscle very quickly. So I want to preserve and even increase muscle mass if I can. And then if I have a man versus woman example, I think the old school thought, even 10 years ago, was that, we should be fasting in the morning and work out to burn glycogen stores. But now there's newer research showing that for men, right, they do well with that fasting mentality, workout, and this. But for women, we actually are designed by our hormones to wake up and eat something first thing. If not, our body signals stress and thinks something is wrong when we exercise too hard without food in our system. And so I definitely individualize things for men, women, your lifestyle, your culture. It's totally different across the board.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the maybe trendy things. And I want your take on them because I've always felt as a health journalist, like, sure, you'll lose weight if you do this, but can you maintain it? You'll lose it, but is it practical? So let's start with the keto diet.
Yeah. Keto is one of those things that I love. And when I say keto, I'll even include carnivore idea, okay? So keto versus carnivore, because it is a little bit different, but in certain respects, it's very similar in the sense that both I don't think can be good long-term, So when people say keto diet, right, we're aiming at probably less than 15 grams of carbs, max, or 20 grams for the day, 23 grams to stay in ketosis. That's difficult if you're having enough vegetables for the day. And when I say enough vegetables, what I mean is a keto diet can lower your sugar very quickly, especially for someone suffering from obesity and diabetes or prediabetes or insulin resistance. It can lower the sugar quickly. So if your sugar is very high, right, it can be very advantageous in the beginning just to get it from, 300, 400s, 500s, crazy unhealthy levels. But once the levels are human levels that we're not going to go to the hospital, right? We're not going to feel extremely terrible. Then we need to look at a long-term strategy. And that's where keto and carnivore, to me, don't fit in. And the reason is because to have the amount of vegetables you would need to get the right micronutrients and phytochemicals I believe you need for cellular health, mitochondrial health, you really can't stay in ketosis very well, So not unfortunately, they just do. Vegetables do have carbs, very good carbs, excellent carbs that we need. But that's why long-term, I don't think they're the best strategy for those trying to lose weight and, get out of diabetes.
What is the diet you see people trying the most that then fails? Is it that one or are there others?
Plant-based. And not because plant-based is bad, but because plant-based has been butchered, I think, in my opinion. So example, when I tell a client about and when I say higher protein diet, I'm talking 30, 40 grams of protein a meal or something like this. But it's kind of, they think it's like a meat diet, right? Because they have to get this protein in. But the reality is 3/4 of my plate is still vegetables, right? It's still, or half the plate depending on the meal. So it's a plant-based diet. It's definitely more plants than anything. But I think when people think plant-based, they think a lower protein, higher carb diet. And I think that's where a plant-based diet doesn't do as well because of the way it's been portrayed, by the words. Do you know what I mean? So I do think it's one of those diets that doesn't work because it winds up being too low in protein the way it's carried out.
Yeah.
I think a plant-based diet can work with the right focus on the right macros and proper nutrition.
I was just talking to a friend a couple of months ago who's been vegetarian for years. And you mentioned you have patients who are vegetarian. How do you get in the 30 grams of protein? Is it lentils? Is it, my mind's blown because she's fairly healthy. I'm like, how do you, it's struggle for me who eats meat. How do you get that in a healthy way?
So we get very creative. Example, and I have no affiliation with any of these. I just mentioned random brands doesn't mean there's not other great ones or anything like that. But one protein shake I love is Owyn, OWYN. So I am always trying new products. And so that is, a vegan-based protein shake that we can use when we're making recipes. So example, say we're using almond flour, lower carb, almond flour to try to make a dessert or, a brownie or something like this, or a waffle, protein waffle. I will have them put some of that in there. You know what I mean? Something they could always just drink the shake, sure, on the run. That's perfect. But I'm saying is you can add protein in these kind of sources like that. So even if it's something that's typically carb, you can make it something that's a higher protein value. Even putting, collagen powder or protein powder in, things like tea, chai tea, a lot of my vegetarian patients like. So we have to basically supplement in a way. Obviously, there's also other things like tofu and this, but then you get into the whole soy versus not soy and, people get, go a little crazy. I think it's okay to have it once a day. Do you know what I mean? They don't have to completely eliminate things like this if they're using it in a way that is helpful for getting the right macros in and it's not dominating their diet. And they're very focused on avoiding things like soy in packaged foods, which it's in most things with preservatives, right? Just knowing that balance, that maybe I'm going to have one source of this a day and then getting that protein up.
Well, and I think that's where, it's why I do what I do in breaking through all the noise, because there are so many products out there that I think a lot of people get overwhelmed and then they quit. They say, I'm going to go buy protein powder. They buy it and it's like, oh, that protein powder has all this stuff in it and I'm learning this and coffee's good for me. Coffee's bad for me. Red wine's good for me. Red wine's bad for me. Like it's so hard to break through some of that noise that people give up.
100%. And so I do think that is very, very difficult. I think it's extremely hard because yes, supplements have a role and they can be quite helpful, but it can be overwhelming. And so the reality is what I do is I look at their diet and I look at where maybe something's more deficient or where we could switch something up. So often, yes, for a lot of people, it's religion with a plant-based diet that they don't want to incorporate animal products. But sometimes it's just because they feel it's healthy, right? And they actually were avoiding meat for that reason. And so when that's the case, it's very easy to incorporate a conversation where maybe we can start incorporating some things back to make it a little easier for them, right? And then equally, I let them know things that are truly unhealthy, like red wine. There's no world where it's good for us, right? So that one, I'll debunk alcohol very quickly. Right? But things that are, you can go back and forth, right? This type of milk, almond milk, whole milk, you know what I mean? Oat milk. People go back and forth over milk, so you go crazy, right? And that's where I think first let's fix the big needle movers and then let's focus on the nitty gritty, depending on where you're at in life and what values are important to you.
Give me some of like your top 5 or 10, just don't do these things. Avoid these things. What would those be?
Screen time before bed. That's number one. I think basically we're all online and we're all not sleeping well. And I say all, that's maybe a little bit dramatic, but it feels the truth because every patient I ask, how do you sleep? Well, I'm in bed by 10. When do you fall asleep? When do you wake up? This is across the board. People are not sleeping well. And things like blue light, they affect the way our REM cycle works, right? So our ability to process our thoughts and sleep at night. And so that is very important. We want people.
I didn't expect that because here we are talking nutrients and weight. So if I'm guessing here that you're saying if you're not sleeping well, then your body's probably not operating where it should and you're not going to lose the weight.
For 1,000 reasons. One, if you're tired or your brain hasn't processed information from the day before, how can you apply it? If you're tired, how can you exercise? If you're tired, how are you going to plan your meals for the week? And if you're tired, your cortisol and ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, shoot through the roof. And if it's through the roof, you're going to be at that fridge every 3 hours snacking. So there's 1,000 reasons why sleep is one of the most important needle movers that most people ignore because we're a culture very focused on what we put in our mouth, a supplement, a food, no matter what it is, that's what the focus is. And sometimes we need to focus on something that would help people across the board, across religion, across culture, across everything, which is sleep. So that would be my number one tip. Avoid blue light before bed, get to bed, no screen time a couple hours before if you can pull it off. Beautiful. I would say my next tip is enough water. I hear so many times, and again, it's only because I see so many patients a day, I can say what's across the board, for everyone. They'll say, I only drink water. Like, I don't drink soda. I don't drink these things. That's fine, but are you drinking enough, right? How many ounces are you getting? Unless you have a heart problem, aiming for half your weight in body ounces of water is the biggest needle mover and discipline action that doesn't require restriction that prevents cravings. So what I mean is when we're dehydrated, our cravings intensify. Things like for sugar, chips. But if we could have the discipline to drink enough water, that would be something that thwarts off cravings without feeling restricted or that someone took something away from us. And that's always a good thing. So that would
So
be number
half
2.
your body weight is what I heard you say. I hear a lot of different ideas in this, but half your body weight in ounces of just water. What about electrolyte water? And does it matter if it's tap water versus filtered water?
Definitely, definitely. So half your weight in body ounces, and I'm a physician, so I feel comfortable saying if you have heart failure, at least 64 ounces, okay? Everyone needs at least 64, even if you have heart failure. Because I feel like people are like, oh, in case they have this condition, let me just say the condition, right? Let's get right to it. And then as far as water goes, yes, it matters. Don't drink tap water if you can avoid it. My mom, she's from Jersey City, and we used to go out to eat, and she would literally be like, she has this accent. I don't do accents very well, but she would literally be like, tap's fine. She's like one of those, and I was just drinking tap water, my whole life. And then I wound up with diabetes and wonder why. Well, the problem is these tap water a lot of times has, things like arsenic, heavy metals that absolutely affect our cells. And they absolutely cause insulin resistance and diabetes. So we have to be careful about our water sources. So it would, obviously, if it's tap water or no water, pick the tap water. Don't just not drink when you're out because it's tap water. Never dehydrate yourself. But if you have the choice, definitely I would avoid tap water and go for either distilled water, or if you have a reverse osmosis filter at home, that's lovely. Again, that's something where different gurus are like distilled, reverse osmosis, one of them. One of them will take out most of the things that are really harming you on a cellular level. The next thing is for electrolyte water. Everyone, when they wake up, for the most part, can be a little bit dehydrated. So an electrolyte water could be a brand like Ultima, right? There's no sugar in those. It can make things more flavorful. So if a brand water that has flavor in it makes water in the morning sound better to you than the coffee, go for it. But if you're someone who feels you wake up in the morning and you feel parched and groggy, electrolyte water can help you. If you wake up and feel fine in the morning, you don't need electrolyte water, if that makes sense. You have to really listen to yourself. So so when it comes to electrolyte water, basically, I ask my patients, do you feel like your head is kind of foggy in the morning? You're feeling tired, headache, dry mouth? Well, then maybe electrolyte water would help you. But otherwise, if you wake up in the morning and you feel refreshed, you feel good, then you probably don't need electrolyte water. There's great brands that can make things flavorful without adding sugars and chemicals. I like Ultima. That's a great one. But you can actually just do this at home with Himalayan sea salt, a squeeze of lemon, and that'll give you a lot of the electrolytes you're missing in the morning and really wake you up. You'll notice the difference first thing.
That's great. I mean, I like electrolyte water, and I have a good brand that I use. And sometimes in the middle of the day, it just helps me down that water. I set goals, and I imagine as a doctor, you like this because I struggle getting enough water, where before I leave the house, I have to finish the one mason jar. Throughout my day, I've got to finish another. And
I'm with
look
you.
at you. I don't know why. Why does water taste better in a mason jar?
So much better.
I don't know why. I like it with a straw too. And then at night, another one before I wake up in the morning. I keep one by my bed. So I try to get those 3, maybe not even enough, but setting goals helps me. So then I have to down it before I leave in the morning because I didn't finish it throughout the morning.
Absolutely. Actually, on our diabetes app or in our group, we have group coaching as well as individualized coaching. But when we end our sessions, we definitely end with what is the goal for the week? Because it's like anything. If you don't have a plan, nothing's going to get accomplished and you're going to be stuck in that overwhelmed loop. So I love that you do that. That's exactly what I love to hear, because if I have a goal, it's much easier to accomplish it than if I never set it to begin with.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll give this to a little tidbit. Just focus on one goal a week. Because like you said, if you have 10 goals, you're probably going to fail at all of them. Just accomplish one of them so you feel really good, and then bring a new one in the next week.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, tell people where they can find you. And I know you've got an app you're working on. Tell me about that.
Yes. So we wanted to make this information very accessible because, if someone goes to a website, it takes a while to kind of type in, you have to plan that in your day. But we're all scrolling, we're all on our phones. Even when you're on Instagram, you're on an app. So I said, if I can make an app that has all the information my clients need to know for diabetes and obesity, reversal, then I should do it. And that's exactly what we did. So we have our diabetes transformation app. And so if you go on the App Store and look up the diabetes reversal method, it will pop right up. And I use diabetes combining the two which are often very intertwined. And that's the best way to really get started with us. And we have everything from do it yourself. You can even start the app for free for a few days. And then we have group coaching plans and one-to-one coaching for those, who don't want to work in a group, right? And those who want to get lab testing and comprehensive protocols for them. So that's the app, the Diabesity Reversal Method.
Well, best of luck with that. I'm excited to try it out. And I just appreciate all you do, your expertise, and you have a podcast as well. So I'll make sure and put the links in the show notes for anyone who wants to find you on all those places. Thanks so much, Dr. Yas.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining the Natalie Tysdal Podcast. You can follow along on Instagram and at natalietysdal.com. Subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave a review so I can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next week.